Everybody, this is Dr. Tim Peck. I'm here with Father Ted, who also happens to be my uncle. Father Ted is one of the most understanding and brave people that I know. He talks about any issue at any time with anybody. And so this is our second episode, and this time we're going to talk a bit about what the Pope has recently said about immigration and policy in the United States, and how that's affected Uncle Ted's everyday life as he is with his congregation, and then move that into difficult conversations. Giving tips on difficult conversations, how we have them, some examples of them as we think about how do we talk about anything right now in this country, immigration being right at the center of it. So Uncle Ted, Father Ted, good to see you, and thank you for doing this again. Do you want to remind people, especially for those watching for the first time, who you are, where you work, and what your mission is?
Well, Tim, it's really great to be with you again. I do love talking with you. I have to be careful what I say when you talk about difficult conversations. I go get myself in trouble. So I'm a Marianist priest, and I'm at the University of Dayton helping out with the students, which I love to do, helping out mostly with confessions, Catholic confessions, and liturgies. So glad to talk with you today. I gave a homily last weekend at a big church here in Dayton, Ohio, Holy Angels Catholic Church. Mm-hmm. And again, I spoke about immigration. So, and the Pope,
can I ask you before, are your colleagues speaking about immigration throughout the country? Are you seeing that? Is that a common thing to be doing in the church on Sundays right now?
Not enough. I think it's not yet in the churches, but the bishops are writing. The Catholic bishops are writing about it. I haven't heard it done in churches enough.
Okay, and why do you think that is? Is it because it's so hard to talk about, or
I think it's like it's all of a sudden hitting us in the country what it's all about, and people are they're stunned by what's happening. So I think being stunned is probably the most part of it. But I think I mentioned last week, I went to this big meeting here in Dayton. 300 people showed up to see what they could do about immigration. So it's beginning to emerge as by people really expressing themselves wisely right now.
Yeah. And we talked about this last time. I'm going to revisit a little bit around, you have so many different pressures in your job as a priest right now, right? You have the law, you have American policy, you have now the Pope saying some things that we have to talk about. You have the American bishops, which aren't always aligned, the Pope and the American bishops, right? It's not always exactly aligned. Right. And then you have your own personal order that you're part of, the Marianists. I'd imagine that those messages are all a bit different, and you need to incorporate all of it before giving a message out and preparing for a homily like this, or is it more your personal views that you share?
You said it. When I prepare these homilies, it's like struggling to know, what do you say? How do you say something that's truthful, that's helpful, that's not against, good human relations or equality of justice. So it's not easy.
Yeah.
but I want to say...
It sounds like it might be easier just to walk away from it and not talk about it.
No, yes. I get very nervous. But the last Sunday I spoke in 2 churches, and I was really happy, actually. And the people liked it, So I want to say, I spoke about the readings last Sunday. So the first reading last Sunday was from the prophet Isaiah. And then the second reading was from St. Paul. And the third one was from St. Luke. So briefly, I found in those readings the principles of what it means to really act in justice and truth. So the prophet Isaiah, he spoke in the year 742 BCE, and he had this vision that he was called to be a prophet. And the vision is from down from heaven into the temple comes the throne of God, and the seraphim, the angels, bring it down. And then they enter into the temple, which is made by human hands. So it's sort of God going into human life. And then Isaiah cries out and he said, I am a man of unclean lips. I live with people of unclean lips. I cannot do what you ask of me. So he's being asked to speak out. And then he says, then in the vision, one of the angels, the seraphim, comes and takes a burning coal and puts it on his lips. And then he realizes he is called by God to speak. He is the model of any one of us speaking the truth. Then the second reading last Sunday was of St. Paul, and St. Paul talked about how he was previously against Christ, and then he recognized he went through all this tremendous change, and then he spoke out for Christ. And then the gospel is from St. Luke, and Luke is trying to encourage the first Christians to have courage and not to be afraid of being who you're supposed to be. And they're out on the Luke describes a scene when the apostles are going out to sea, and they've worked all night long, rather. And Jesus says, go out again and catch. And they don't want to go. We've been working all day long. We're tired. So they do it, and they put the nets out, and they have this extraordinary catch. And Peter falls down and said, I'm not worthy of you. And Jesus says, do not fear. You're going to be catching men. So it's an encouragement to do what you're called to do in life and well. So I think that's a principle that we're in a sense, we're all prophets. We have to speak the truth to leadership, and you have to speak the truth to society when society is going in the wrong direction. And Jesus represented it. He wasn't against laws and paying taxes. He had at one point the people go and didn't pay the taxes they had to pay to the Roman government. Or when he cured somebody, he said, go into the priest and do what you have to do if you're cured. So he wasn't against authority, but he was always healing the weakest of society, always bringing, health and consciousness of growth. So a prophet is one who does that thing in your life. You encourage healthiness and growth, and you don't destroy. So that's kind of the basic principle.
Yeah, I mean, I got a bit of a chill when you were speaking, because I'm personally going through some things right now and conversations with my family around, should I run for Congress again or not? And part of me wants to just make a bigger garden and buy some cows and make my farm a little bit more hardy, put some fruit trees up and stick around there and not leave the property right now. That's part of me. And then another probably much larger part of me says, the world is changing. It always is. And I've been given some gifts and some skills, and also a lot of collegial colleagues and supporters and friends and things over this last couple of years of running, to walk away from that and not do maybe what I've been called to do is difficult to think about, right? And have those difficult conversations with people on every side of the aisle. That I kind of drift toward the middle, really, when it comes to a lot of these issues. And that means when you're in the middle, it means you're having difficult conversations with everybody on both sides, with your friends and foes. And for me, I always think anyone I'm talking to could be a future friend, right? Yeah. Anyone I'm talking to could be a future friend. So this idea of not kind of walking away from it is one thing, but before I stop, let's say there's also this, what I'm hearing in there is a little bit of like imposter syndrome, of like this idea of, who am I to be saying these things? Who am I to be out there and, expressing my own opinions, etc. Like,
Mhm.
I'm not, my lips aren't pure, kind of thing. And
Mhm.
there's also this message of, find the good in yourself, and put yourself out there to
Mhm.
help be part of progress in the country, but in our lives and in our relationships.
Well, Tim, you have hit the nail on the head. That's exactly what the prophet went through. Should he was afraid to speak out. I don't have the ability to speak out. I can't speak out. And yet the process you're going through, I think the country's going through that same process. What do we do in this situation? And I came to the conclusion, if you don't speak out, it's much worse. If you let the evil surround you go on, that's much worse. And I want to quote Thomas Merton. Thomas Merton, maybe the people many know him. I think I mentioned him last week. I'm not sure, but he was this writer, tremendous spiritual writer. And I could say many things about him, but at one point in his life, he was tempted to give up his writing. And you know what when he did that, he said he was haunted by the virgin spirit of our faith. And he had to go beyond the darkness that prevents him from seeing only half-lighted shadows. So he knew that he was writing about something that he's discovering very profound and real. And he had to go beyond the darkness that's in there and get to the truth, and he had to write it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a struggle we all go through.
These
Right?
half-lighted shadows. I mean,
Yeah.
that is beautiful. And again, this thing for myself, that always feeling part of where, where's the truth? Where is, when I'm having these conversations, I can't think that I'm right completely, because I'm not. I'm human, right? And have my
Mhm.
opinions, but it's also a journey, right? And so everybody you talk to, and I get to talk to thousands of people about so many different things, you just grow and you learn, and you almost
Mhm.
always feel like you're in that half shadow of, where of trying to come out toward the light of where the truth is, and just learning from so many different people. So it gets into, again, the idea of encouraging people to have the difficult conversations right now in such a
Mhm.
way that you realize that you
Mhm.
may, even if you feel the truth, you may not know the truth. And it's likely somewhere you can always learn something from someone else.
Let me quote you. You and I talked before we got on about this letter. Pope Francis just wrote a letter to the American bishops. It's about immigration, and I think it's worthwhile saying what he said in the letter. So basically, he's very kind to them. He's encouraging them to do what they have to do for the immigrant. But then he gets in sort of the principle. Then it's kind of difficult to understand this maybe, but he says the true common good is promoted when society and government, with creativity and strict respect for the rights of all, and then he says, as I have affirmed on numerous occasions, welcomes, protects, promotes, and integrates the most fragile, uprooted, and vulnerable. This does not impede the development of a policy that regulates orderly and legal migration. However, this development cannot come about through the privilege of some and the sacrifice of others. What is built on the basis of force and not on the truth about the equal dignity of every human being begins badly and will end badly. So what I got, he's getting to the essential principle of the dignity of every human being.
Mm-hmm.
And if you build society on avoiding that, or not producing, not respecting you're going to build a bad society. That's the principle, I think.
Yeah. And where is it's amazing, and where this intersects with law, it's interesting. I know that the Episcopalian Church and I think it's like 25 different churches. Um, one of the churches from the Jewish faith, all of these banded together to sue the federal government around making sure that ICE can't come into churches or places of worship.
Mm-hmm.
And the basis of the lawsuit is that attendance is down because of that. People are scared to go out into public because of it. And so it's interesting to see where this dovetails into the actual action of the law and where the fight is. I think it's going to be around that issue, because from there it will spread to other, more sensitive or sacred places. So, your thoughts on, having the protection of the public space of a church to be a place where you can be free to worship and not worry that, it'll be disrupted.
Yeah, because it's based on that principle. The law is not above the legal law is not above the moral law, and innocent people who are going through so much difficulty or even poverty, and to the church is someplace where they have the right of sanctuary. The church has the right to uphold that moral law, the dignity of people, so they're not mistreated.
And you're saying this is a kind of a legal, when you say the right, are you saying more of a legal constitutional right or more of a human religious right?
To tell you the truth, I don't know all the legalities of that, to tell you the truth, but it seems to me it's such ingrained in human nature that people have that right of sanctuary at times when they're being mistreated by the law.
Yeah.
It's just good, healthy respect for human beings.
I'm going to ask you a difficult question, and this predates what's going on now. Have you ever been part of with the church around providing sanctuary for people who might have been persecuted in one way or another? What does that look like? And is there conversation around that, or are we talking about more active giving sanctuary to people, or is it just open up the church doors? Anyone who comes for Sunday Mass is having sanctuary at that time.
I have not heard of any churches that have had difficulty. I do know that on the border, I'm pretty sure it's in El Paso, a Catholic agency called Annunciation Center, where the immigrants would come in, was by some of the Texas authorities down there was persecuted and wouldn't allow workers in. I don't even know all the details of it, but
yeah.
And then the church came out very strongly and saying, "Well, we have a right to welcome the people crossing the border. You can't prevent us from doing that."
Right. And so what I'm hearing from the Pope's statements are, of course, I think the word was orderly and legal, a way of enforcing your border protections and immigration, and that should be respected. I heard that in there. And I also heard, but people are people, and let's treat them like people. And even though that this is tough, right? And some people may need to leave based off of the way the law works, etc. But in doing so and going through this process, using fear, using hate, trying to say that one person is better than the other is rhetoric that's just not helpful to the acceptance of humans being humans.
See, all those are the principles. I mean, when you speak to the people that are trying to get the lawyers to help them, it is so complicated. The lawyers are overworked, so it's to solve the problem is not going to be easy by any means, And then you have to as Isaiah the prophet, you have to help the leaders say, well, am I doing this against immigrants for what purpose? What is the intention in the mind of leaders wanting to do this? Yeah. Is it really beneficial? Is there another way than sending all the immigrants back that is much more beneficial to the country?
Mm-hmm. And this idea of better than, again, just hearing that in there I think as we start to think about difficult conversations, maybe we can transition a little bit into that with individuals and people who don't share the same viewpoints as us. So this idea, I think the biggest problem that many people struggle with is a bias to thinking that your views are better than the other person's going into a conversation, right? Because you get so held in your beliefs, and it gets echo chamber after echo chamber from the algorithms of social media, from the, whether you watch MSNBC or Fox News, it just gets echo chambered, and you get deeper and deeper in your bubbles, and it starts to become that your view is better than, not only is right, is better than the other side, and that just arrests any type of real conversation. And so I think acknowledging that we all likely feel that way. I know I have that struggle of saying, okay, I can't think that what I'm thinking is better than. I have to go into this as a learning opportunity and make a new conclusion from it, right? Even if it just changes a hair, my opinion after it. It's hard to practice on it. And sometimes when you're tired, it's even harder, right? So I don't know. I'm sure you're getting into these difficult conversations.
I had one the other day with someone who would disagree with me on many of these things, and we just spent about an hour on Zoom just talking. But I want to tell you something that the Catholic Church, maybe the people listening realizes, but the present Pope has helped the Catholic Church for the last 4 years learn out how do we solve the biggest problems we're facing. And he set up a synod, and a synod is a council, and the Church has been doing this for centuries. But this time, over a period of 4 years, all the dioceses, all the big institutions of the Catholic Church were asked to say, what are the main problems? And then I'm going to make this simple, but they came together, the bishops and lay experts, and they whittled it down to about 15 major problems. And they did it by not coming in a big group of about 400 people, but they sat in tables of 10. And they took these problems, and the process was each individual, they gave them a problem, like, how do you help solve the role of women in the church? And so each individual had to express their opinion. Then every other individual had to say what they heard from the other. And then after they did that, then they talked about the solution to the problem. And they did this, and what they found out was, by coming together, they did this for 4 weeks for 2 years in October. The people that disagreed all of a sudden appreciated the other. And some of them were so angry at the beginning, they didn't even want to sit down and talk. But gradually, they listened to each other, and they grew into a deep appreciation for each other and the background of each other. And so Pope Francis says, this has got to be the process of the Catholic Church. It's got to be the process of society, where people sit down carefully and listen to each other. At the end of this, there was agreement on these issues like authority in the church. And they agree, well, every bishop in the church has to have someone that evaluates the bishop. You can't let the authority just say, or a pastor. He has to have a group that evaluates them. So they came about with these principles, but it's from a dialogue of profound listening. That's got to happen in society.
Is that check and balance system in place now with bishops? Is that there's a
It is.
council of people who keep that bishop in check?
It's mandated for every diocese, you know. Of course, some bishops are faster to put in operation than others, but
I'm sure. I'm sure. Yeah, I mean, to be human, right? And
yeah.
to hear criticism of yourself is difficult, and
Mhm,
but does make you have
mhm.
stronger leadership in the end. I love that that's there. I didn't realize that that's in place now.
Oh, and the women's issue is really tough again, and the LGBT question is very difficult because in Africa, you know, homosexuality is like a crime. In the
Hmm.
United States, it's much more liberal. So how do you solve that problem? You know, where is the doctrine? So the Pope is very careful. He will not go against the doctrine of the Catholic Church, but he keeps listening to LGBTQ or people that think differently. He listening to them, respecting them as you talk to them.
Hmm.
And then out of that, hopefully people listening will discover what is the true scientific, you know, Christian way to solve these problems. It's not going to come fast, though.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
No, that idea, just listening, even if you disagree,
Mm.
um, and we all disagree about something, right? You and I disagree about plenty in our long talks. And so, yeah, but it is about talking and listening and finding and making that space.
Mhm.
So I wonder, how people who are listening make that space for these conversations. And I hope this, this video, this podcast becomes a space for that, right? Where people who are listening into it might be able to share it with someone who has a different opinion than them and say, what did you think about that? What did you think about when they said this or that? And have that conversation in a way that can be respectful.
Mhm.
That would be my dream, my hope of this particular show that we have, Father Ted with Dr. Tim. Yeah.
Yeah. I love getting into this kind of a thing where you're really sort of looking for answers.
Hmm.
And I had a wonderful conversation with someone disagreed with me very much, and we had this, as I on Zoom, we had this great conversation. I respect the man much more than when I understand where he's coming from.
Hmm.
Yeah. Mm.
Hmm. Well, thank you again for this. I think it's really special to be able to have these conversations, difficult conversations, to see where the church is coming from, to see what it is to be human for you as well, to struggle with all those different
Mhm.
influences in your life as you're doing that, to be realizing that you're speaking to not a monolith of people, that they're not all the same, but
Mhm.
talking to a whole spectrum of people as you're speaking, talking to people who really disagree with you, and making sure that you still reach them and have conversation and know that that's not only for others to change, but for you to change as well.
Yeah.
And just as I said, it's as the Pope has been saying, it's not only for others to change to do what the church doctrine is today, but to think about how the church needs to change in ways as well.
Right.
And it's not a stagnant institution, which sometimes it feels that way to Americans and to myself, because it moves at a pace that's much slower than what
Mhm.
a startup we might create, or
Mhm.
a school board could do, or an executive order can do. But again, it comes from a place of understanding.
Well, Tim, I'm glad you're saying, but you know what, you're saying it with kind of a smile, so you have a kind of sort of a basic positiveness in there, which is great. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Have a good week, and I'll talk to you next week.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.